Okay, and here we are. Hey everyone, thanks for your patience. Getting a couple minutes late start here. We are just doing a little bit of technology check, make sure because we have a lot of people joining us today. So I think we're safe and sound. Just want to make sure that everybody can hear us and see us. And if not, please make a notation in chat. And just for safekeeping, you can also do in Q&A as well to make sure that we see you. Because we are 4 minutes in, I'm going to get started. Okay. So first of all, let me just thank everybody for joining us. I'm incredibly excited for reasons that you will see here shortly. But my name is Matt Miller. I'm the Senior Director of Sales for Beam Global. Okay, so I want to welcome you to Beam's latest webinar. We're going to focus on federal funding programs for EV charging infrastructure under the new administration. That's a big deal, and you'll see why there's a lot of details around that. We're excited to have you join us because we're going to explore the fluid and evolving landscape of federal funding for clean mobility specifically, and how you can position your projects for success, which is really the end goal here for today. So we're going to cover how to navigate the federal funding process. Never an easy task if you've ever tried it. Best practices for crafting successful applications. Then we're going to look at an overview of available and upcoming programs, which to me is the nugget of gold. Sometimes we have blind spots on that, and some insights on how Beam products support EV charging, emergency preparedness, and energy resiliency. So if you're familiar with our products at all, you know exactly what I'm talking about, but we're going to cover that in more detail as well. A little bit of housekeeping. So this is going to be roughly 30 minutes, give or take. We're going to have a Q&A session at the end. Please ask questions during the presentation with the Q&A button at the bottom, a little square with an arrow coming at it. At the bottom of your screen, just type in your question, and then we're going to address those at the end, okay? The webinar is being recorded, so if someone were able to make it, you're going to be able to share that with them. And then lastly, before I do introductions, a very pivotal part of what we do is the investment tax credit. So you may or may not be familiar with that. We're going to touch on that. That's a timely issue, one that is expiring. In our industry, have the fortune of that disposition with the federal tax credit for many years now, but that's being sunsetted. So we're going to cover that briefly at the end. And so for now, let me introduce our speakers and we'll jump right in, okay? So at Beam Global, we are always honored to have Amanda Wood. She's the Senior Director at Becker and Poliakoff in Washington, D.C. with us today. Amanda has been working with Beam customers for 5+ years, and she's helped several of them acquire funding to move their Beam deployments forward, which is a fantastic tool that we have, and one that is hard sought. Like finding what the information we're going to cover today is amazing. Amanda's services are absolutely no cost to you guys, by the way. So there's not a bill coming through the chat at the end of this thing, right? She's going to give this information off the cuff, free of charge. She's going to be looking at how to draft grant narrative language, which is an art in and of itself, identifying key local regional grant contacts to engage on your behalf. And then we're going to review application prior to submittal, all the things, all the details that are going to make success for you when you're looking at getting this funding. She brings extensive experience in federal funding for municipalities, corporate, and nonprofits, making her well equipped to guide us through today's topic. But before that, let's jump into a quick overview of Beam Global's rapidly deployable off-grid and transportable EV charging solutions. I'm happy to introduce Andy Ike, Beam's Clean Mobility Sales Manager, to share the fastest way to add EV charging anywhere. I'm going to hand it over to Andy. I'm going to go off camera, but I'm still here. And please take it away, Andy.
Thank you so much, Matt. And hey, hello, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us here today in our latest federal funding webinar. Before we talk about some of the federal funding opportunities, I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the Beam off-grid renewable EV charging products that we offer here that are eligible for some of these federal funding opportunities that we're going to talk about. And our flagship product that many of you may already be aware of is what's called our EV ARC product. So that's what's showcased here on the right-hand side of the slide. So essentially, the EV ARC is a fully solar-powered, off-grid, and transportable electric vehicle charging solution. It is a level 2 top-off charging solution We're using the exact same level 2 charging stations on the EV ARC that other organizations are physically installing into the ground and connecting to the grid. The difference with us is that instead of using the grid to power those level 2 chargers, we're instead using solar plus onboard battery storage as a replacement for the grid. The solar array on the EV ARC is equipped with our patented beam track sun tracking technology. So throughout the day, the array will track the sun so that's always pointed in the best direction for solar collecting at any given point in time. So that generates all the power. And then every unit has onboard energy storage that lives in that enclosure, that large white box under the array. So if you're not charging up cars during the day, you're charging up the batteries in the off-grid system. And then by doing that, you're storing energy in those batteries, for nighttime charging, maybe for your fleet vehicles. You're also storing it on hand for any kind of like cloudy or rainy days. And, maybe most importantly, you're storing that energy in the batteries in case of an emergency with it there from that side. So there's a really important resiliency and emergency preparedness play with the EV ARC and with other beam products that we're going to talk a little bit more about as we move on. And that emergency preparedness and resilience play ultimately opens many of these products up to those sorts of funding streams, which you can't use just for any EV charging station that's connected to the grid. It is worth noting too that, since the system is off grid, besides the resiliency and emergency preparedness play, you're also not going to pay any utility rates related to your EV charging. So you'll see long-term savings that comes as a result of that. And then the last bit about this system that's important is that since it's off grid, that also means this system is transportable. So ultimately, having a transportable charging solution just gives you this incredible amount of flexibility and scalability you simply don't get when you're installing EV charging that's connected to the grid. And, for customers of ours that are installing EV charging that's connected to the grid, many of them are telling us it's taking them at least 18 to 24 months long to install. But when you order an EV ARC, they are usually delivered about 2 weeks from order. And when they're delivered fully assembled with the level 2 EV charging station of your choice already installed on the system, so that once it arrives on site on delivery day, ultimately you are set up in charging cars within just a couple of hours after it gets on site there from that side of things. So lots of fantastic benefits with the EV ARC. We're going to share a video with you all afterwards of showing just basically how we deliver an EV ARC and ultimately how we help you add EV charging 2 weeks from order and how you're set up in charging cars within just a couple of hours after it getting on site. What's showcased here is our ARC mobility trailer, which is a patented hydraulic lift trailer. It's a specialized trailer that we use to deliver and to relocate EV ARC systems, and ultimately allows you to move these systems with just one single individual. And it's by far and above the fastest and easiest way to move these systems around. It's also a great investment if you want to relocate these systems quickly and efficiently in case of an emergency to maybe a disaster-stricken area, something like that with it from that front. Now, it's worth noting that we have been deploying EV ARC units in the field now for over 12 plus years there from that front. So this is a tried and tested solution. And, off the success of the EV ARC, we have devised several other product lines that take the concept of the EV ARC in terms of it being rapidly deployable, set up quickly, off-grid and transportable, and design some other setups for that setup to charge other types of electric vehicles. So what you're seeing here on this slide is our Beam bike product. So think EV ARC, but just designed for charging electric bikes specifically. So Beam bikes, they use solar with tracking plus battery storage, just like the EV ARC. It's fully off-grid, just like the EV ARC. Just the simple thing is that it's equipped with a bike holster that has 12 outlets so you can charge up to 12 electric bikes with one Beam bike system. And one of the main benefits of why we developed the EV ARC is that, ultimately it allows you to add e-bike charging anywhere that you have the sizing of a standard size parking space and good sunlight. And it allows you to bring your electric bike charging outdoors, ultimately where it's safest and most secure. Unfortunately, while we're obviously very excited about the rapid growth of electric bikes, in communities across the country, we have found that there are several safety issues in terms of individuals bringing electric bikes indoors. Sometimes these electric bikes catch fire, and obviously that's a safety hazard. So again, Beam bike lets you bring that bike charging outdoors where it is safest and most secure there from that front. This is another product that we're all really excited about. This is Beam Patrol. So again, think EV ARC, but think for charging electric motorcycles instead also too. So electric motorcycles are growing rapidly. We definitely see this as something that's going to be a fantastic advantage, for law enforcement or border patrol. Locations where you want electric bike charging and electric motorcycle charging. And electric motorcycles have a lot of benefits to them. They are extremely quiet. They allow you to sneak up on the bad guys there from that side of things. And again, it allows you to deploy charging for your electric bikes anywhere that you have sunlight and the size of a standard parking space as well too there from that front. This is the Beam Scoot. So again, EV ARC, but this is for charging electric scooters there from that side of things. We can charge up to 4 electric mopeds here, like you can see here in this rendering there from that front. And just to kind of piggyback off the Beam Scoot, this is the Beam Well product. So this is for charging electric scooters, kind of like what you saw before on the prior slide, but this also includes a desalination tool as well too. So this is allowing us to take salt water and convert it into potable water, so fully drinking water there from that side of things. So we see this as a tool that's going to be really fantastic for organizations like the Red Cross and UNICEF, who are providing aid in countries across the world with it there from that side of things. Now, just to transition a bit to one of our newer smart city products. So this is what we call our Beam Spot product. So Beam Spot is a streetlight replacement that also doubles as an EV charging solution. So the way this system works is we have solar with batteries, much like the EV ARC, but it's designed in a streetlight setup. And then we'll also notice that with this product, we have a large wind turbine at the top of the unit for additional renewable generation. So the idea with this is that you're going to be able to add EV charging anywhere that you have streetlights. So think Main Street USA, on street right of way, parallel parking locations. Also think of this as a great solution for any large open surface parking lots where you're already going to have streetlights. So we think this is going to be a really fantastic solution for stadiums, concert and event venues, arenas, there from that side. So essentially the way the system will work is you'll use the solar and wind for renewable generation. That will be primarily for charging the electric vehicles. And then the grid connection the system will hook up to will already be there for the streetlight that it's replacing there from that front. And that'll be there to power the streetlight primarily there from that side of things. So one last thing to kind of talk about before I hand this over to Amanda, she's going to talk about some of the federal funding opportunities, is just to circle back to, sort of the resiliency and emergency preparedness side of our systems. It's really important to talk about. So one of the main factors of to why, so many, government agencies and public organizations are investing in Beam products is they need resilient electric vehicle charging solutions. So many, government customers have significant fleet electrification goals. And, many of our customers who have a significant portion of their fleet as electric are concerned about, what happens if there is a major blackout or a grid outage, or there is a major weather event like a hurricane or a forest fire that knocks out the grid for a few days. How are they going to be able to keep their fleet vehicles running and still providing vital services to their constituents, even in those emergency type of scenarios? So since the EV ARC and the Beam Bike and those other products are off grid, you'll still be able to charge those vehicles and keep them running in during those times. Now, all of these systems, except for the Beam Spot at this point, can be equipped with this optional feature called the emergency power panel. So the emergency power panel is illustrated in those pictures there at the top right of this slide. And essentially, the emergency power panel, it's an integrated panel of 120 and 240 volt outlets. And that panel of outlets has a heavy duty fiberglass door that lives in front of them. So you can basically put a padlock on them and you can designate access control. And the emergency power panel is located on the enclosure of the systems. So it's about 9.5 feet above the ground. So we always say that the EV ARC and the Beam Spot's enclosure is fully flood-proof and vandalism-proof up to about 9.5 feet, and so is that emergency power panel. Over the course of the last 12 plus years we've been deploying the system, we've had EV ARCs that have survived through hurricanes or other major weather events. So that blurry picture that you see here on the bottom of the right is actually a few of our systems that were deployed on the Florida Gulf Coast that survived Hurricane Helen a few years ago, where they had several feet of storm surge. And you can see from this picture that the EV arcs are still on and operating, even though there's probably about 4 to 5 feet of storm surge there in that picture. And after the hurricane, these units were still working and still able to provide vital off-grid power to vital devices that needed electricity in those days that were following the hurricane with it there from that front. So it's a hurricane-proven product there from that front, just like you can see there in that picture. So anyway, I'm going to go ahead and hand this on over to Amanda Wood, our federal funding consultant, and she's going to talk a little bit more about some of the immediate federal funding opportunities that we're tracking that BEAM products are eligible for. So Amanda, all yours. Go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Andy. We've been doing these together for a few years, and I love that each time I find out about new capabilities and new ways these EV ARCs can be used. So thank you so much for that. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, federal funding is a really hot topic because it's so closely tied to the operation of our federal government, of course. I'll just give you a quick update from DC on what's happening today. So we are starting week 4 of a federal government shutdown, unfortunately. I would like to tell you that there is an end very much in sight, but it remains a little murky still here. The latest effort has been to pass sort of a straight several week extension of federal programs that would get the government back and open. The good news is that the federal government has found ways to pay some of our essential Department of Defense employees, and I know is working to do the same for air traffic controllers and to provide some of the essential services. But what I want you to know is that the funding doesn't disappear when the federal government is shut down. It just goes on pause for a little while. So we're paused on new federal solicitations coming out. But there's going to be plenty of funding, sort of recurring funding we've seen year after year, some new funding sources. We have a little bit of time to get ourselves together to be ready when those come out. So I think that's the spirit in which I'm sort of talking about things today. It's time to get ready, and we can help you to get ready. There are some short-term impacts on funding, but again, this will not impact mid and long-term opportunities. We're going to go on to the next slide, where I'm going to talk a little bit about the fact that with all this federal funding, sometimes you have to sort of shift the ways that you're talking about the projects that you're trying to push forward. And we really want to make sure always that applications reflect what DC is thinking. I think people think there's a lot of animosity in DC, and sometimes that's the case, but there are some really basic things where we have a ton of consensus, and we should really be trying to build our applications around those areas of consensus and where this administration is focusing their efforts. So luckily, EV ARCs and BEAM and solutions like this are really well aligned with a lot of those priorities. Support for domestic production and American workers. We're manufacturing these in San Diego, which is fantastic. Shifting power and decision-making to states and local governments, really funding you all directly when possible, getting the federal government out of your way and making sure you have the resources to do the work you want to do. Emphasis on measurable outcomes and performance metrics. Data, data, data. When you get your EV ARC, it's going to generate a lot of data, but when you're deciding where to place these EV ARCs, use some data to help make your case, certainly. Resiliency and protecting critical infrastructure. Andy did a great job of talking about that. And that's an angle that a lot of the communities we work with are using in order to have successful applications. And then public-private partnerships for infrastructure. Really public-private everything, privatizing some things that governments would have typically done. So when you're thinking about your sort of public approach to EV ARCs and to EV charging, think big. Maybe a private location ends up being the best location. So sort of open your mind to the fact that, hey, maybe our parks have a lot of folks coming, but that shopping center down the street has vastly more. So again, something we'd look at in terms of data. Next slide. Okay, so they're thinking about these things and then they're putting some money behind them. I'm going to talk about some of these today. One is an Infrastructure Investment Jobs Act program, the DOT Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Grant, which is still out there. FEMA preparedness grants, assistance to firefighters grants, as we have some of these first responder sort of versions focused on either law enforcement or public safety and fire. There are funding streams specifically for those sectors. The HUD Community Development Block Grant, a highly flexible funding stream, and then congressionally directed spending or earmarks, the way that your member of Congress gets to send some money right back home to you. Next slide. Okay, I'm going to talk first, and I'm going to run through these relatively quickly because I want you to know that you do not need to become an expert on these federal funding streams. One of the things that I do is I work every day directly with public agencies to help them apply for this funding, figure out what the best fit is for you, take you through the entire process. So we'll run through these, happy to answer questions on them, but then really look forward to working one-on-one with you to capture this funding. Okay, USDOT Charging and Fueling Infrastructure Grant, $2.5 billion. It's the corollary program to the NEVI program. There is one round of funding remaining, $500 million. This is sort of the state, sort of the local government direct funding stream for EV charging infrastructure. We expect that this will be released in this fiscal year to sort of wrap up the funding available through the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. Next slide. HUD Community Development Block Grants. So these are the highly flexible funds that about 1,200 cities and counties in the United States receive every single year. Now, these are very flexible funds, so they're highly sought after within the community, but we want you to know that they have a very specific allowable use that's so well aligned with what we can accomplish, and that is activities relating to energy conservation and renewable energy sources. So sometimes federal funding is piecing together different funding streams. This may help you close the gap, and we're happy to look at historical funding in your community and help you sort out who in your local economic development department is the right person to work with to move this sort of initiative forward. Next slide. Oh, I love talking about community project funding. So my background is Capitol Hill. I was a Senate legislative director, and when I was on the Hill, I helped all the communities and nonprofits and schools in my state to access federal funding through earmarks or community project funding. And since I left Capitol Hill, I've been doing the same thing and really helping nonprofits and public agencies, cities, counties, law enforcement agencies, ports, airports, to go to their members of Congress to ask for funding to be included in the annual appropriations bill. So that project is really going to gear up in the next couple of months as we submit new projects for the next fiscal year. We should talk, not all members of Congress request earmarks. I'd say roughly 80% do, but let's go ahead and, since we have a little time, start to put that project scope together with Andy or Matt or one of the other folks from BEAM, and then go to your member of Congress and see if they're open to submitting such a request. It's a really transparent process, typically no match requirement, so it's something high viability that we'd love to help you submit. Next slide. Okay, so there are some very basic things you have to do before you apply for grants, and they're so basic that sometimes people forget to do it, and then it's time to submit, and it's like a hair on fire situation. So we don't want that to happen. So right now, you can go ahead and your organization may already have these. You need to figure out who in your organization is the holder of these passwords and these accounts. But if you don't have one, you need to get a unique entity ID from sam.gov and complete your registration in the System for Award Management, SAM. You need to set up your personal and organization profile on grants.gov or figure out who in your organization already has those. And then ensure internal coordination with other departments or public-private partnerships. Some of the funding streams we talk about do require coordination. So if it's HUD Community Development Block Grant Funds, you're going to work with your economic development folks. If it's a emergency preparedness grant, which is a great route to take, you're going to work with your emergency management folks. You may be working closely with your transportation folks in your municipality. But it's really, this is the time to develop those relationships. And if they have questions about either the solution or the funding stream, we're happy to hop on a call with them and discuss that and walk them through it. And then really you need to develop that, go ahead and develop that project scope with the folks at BEAM, including your deployment locations and whether they're going to be on public property or private property, and how accessible they're going to be and what you're going to be able to provide to your constituents. Next slide. So we talked a little bit about this. This is really where we start thinking about each funding stream and the buy-in that we need. And I really hate to wait until the last minute to do these things when we have time now. So again, depending on which funding stream, and we can help you sort out which will be most viable for you. It may be emergency management, transportation planning, economic development, private landowners for those public-private partnerships, and then importantly, your congressional delegation. Your members of Congress are really key. Next slide. So I'll explain why it's really important to engage with your federal electeds. It's not just because I am sitting in DC and a former congressional staffer. It's because with all of these federal funding streams, there are many, many, many more highly qualified projects than there is funding. So getting your member of Congress to weigh in, for example, with a federal agency in support of your application, we can draft those talking points, we can write those letters of support, we can do the outreach for you. It's really important. Some of your members of Congress are also in really key positions to increase overall funding levels through the budget and appropriations process for some of these programs. They can help by directing funding right to you through community project funding or earmarks. And then, they can really influence agency priorities in lots of ways, whether it's through hearings or inquiries and oversight and press. It's just really important that we have your member of Congress on board, and we're very happy to play that role and help you advocate for your project here in DC. Next slide. Okay, so just want to reassure you that we have been helping customers to capture federal funding for off-grid solar-powered EV charging for years and years now through multiple administrations, before the extraordinary funding in the bipartisan infrastructure law, and through lots of funding sources that have been recurring and will continue to be recurring. So I think there's all this anxiety about federal funding, but really federal funding is here to stay, and we can help you navigate what may seem like an intimidating process, but we're here to work on it every step of the way with you. Next slide. And here's some of the ways we're here to help. So we'll help to identify the high viability grant opportunities for you and then take you through the process. With earmarks, we will determine if your member of Congress accepts them, help draft them, and help you advocate. Reprogramming prior year funding. This is important. If you have prior year funding through a funding stream that would have this as an allowable use, and I can do some research on that for you. The money hasn't disappeared, and we can help you reallocate it to your BEAM project. We can provide language for your applications, competitive grants, or internal justifications. Identify the folks in your community who you need to coordinate with on some of these grants. Get your congressional delegation engaged for political support. So important. And then when you get the funding, we can help you deal with any red tape to try to, get it drawn down as quickly as possible. Next slide. And I'm going to pass this one over to Matt, who's going to talk about the ITC.
Fantastic, Amanda. Thank you. That was awesome. Couple points. I see some questions. We're going to get to those in just a minute. One thing I want to point out, because that was a lot of great information. And like our products that pack a ton of value into a nice package, that was a ton of information in a very short period of time. So a couple of salient points here. We have a product not connected to the grid, not connected to the ground. It's sustainable. It is for a lot of scenarios that government agencies are going to like, which is mainly, we don't have to go through infrastructure. We are a resiliency piece if the grid goes down in emergency situations, et cetera. And then if I could summarize, if we're on the elevator going to the second floor, what we're going to leverage with Amanda Wood is a one-on-one effort to achieve and win your goals. Okay, so I just want to pin that. That's a lot of information, but if I were to say, like I said, floor 1, floor 2 elevator ride, those are the takeaways. So we have a couple questions, but let me tackle the ITC. If you all are familiar, in our industry, we've had the advantage of this for some time. And the qualifying aspects of it are solar and battery with the EV ARC, our product at Beam, okay? And so it has shifted with this administration. Prior to this administration, and before I say another word, I got to disclaim I'm not a CPA, okay? But we've been doing this long enough to be able to talk about it and advise, but check with your CPA for your scenario. But what the ITC enables for you as the purchaser, site host, et cetera, is a 30% tax credit for a percentage of the cost of installing our product, okay? And that's on the total cost of the system. Direct pay came out with the Biden administration. So government agencies historically have not been able to take advantage of the tax credit, but now they have direct pay. So you would be able to take advantage of the cash payout equivalent to what that tax credit would be. Prior to the new administration, it was an indefinite ability to leverage that tax credit under the Biden administration. I know I'm giving some detail here, but bear with me. That the main point is this is going away. Okay, so it was going to be ratcheted down, but now the 30% is going to go away. Again, talk to your tax professional. But based on what the code says now, just briefly, is that though it's going away, we do still have a little bit of time to take advantage of this. And we can talk with you specifically about your project when we meet with you about not only the ITC, but how we apply it to the EV ARC or any of the other products that Andy reviewed. So with that, I want to tackle some questions. I see a few coming through. Thank you very much. There's one regarding funding. I'm going to send over to you right now, Amanda. Do you have any insight into when the next round of CFI will be released?
Oh, I wish I did. You know, we saw a number of grants released back in January and February that were pulled back and then re-released. So I think this administration is taking a lot of time to scrub those grants. I mentioned that CFI is sort of the corollary program to NEVI, which was the state funding, which this administration pulled back. And then the court said, hey, you got to spend that funding. Congress appropriated it. You need to spend it. So it was re-released with some new language and new qualifications. So I think that's what we're really seeing, that this funding is coming, but it's delayed because the focus on some of these is changing a bit. So funding is still available, but again, it's going to be about how we talk about our projects. That's really going to make the difference in these applications. So it is taking some time, and you know, I would hope that we would reopen the government and CFI would come rolling out. Either way, we will be ready when it comes out. We will have language prepared for you that is very specific to any new grant qualification. So you'll be hearing from us. You won't miss it, I promise.
That's great. Thanks, Amanda. Hey, everyone. Also, just to make a note here, we're going to answer all these questions outside of the webinar if we can't get to them today. Just so you know, we'll send out those answers to you. I'm just going through them now. This is an interesting one that I think it would serve us all well. They all will, but this one we could tackle pretty quickly. When a city has to move forward with site prep or conduit work, but federal awards remain uncertain, does BEAM suggest procurement first or funding first sequencing? And the person said, I would assume procurement. And I think the special sauce secret that we have, please, Amanda, go ahead.
So federal funding is not available to reimburse anything. So what we often find is communities are like, I am so eager to do this. I'm going to go ahead and deploy a couple of EV ARCs using the funding that we have. And I'm also at the same time going to apply for federal funding to get even more and to expand our program. So you can go ahead and start your project, and then we can really, you know, expand it greatly going forward using federal funding. But I would never recommend, if you don't have any local funding and you're really fully dependent on federal funding, make sure you have that federal funding in hand before you go to procurement.
Great point. One way I'll answer that a little differently for the question is no conduit here. The BEAM EV ARC does not require conduit. So as soon as you get your funding, and this is also sort of segueing into James Welch's question, which is we are state university, and the Parking Services Department is working with the Emergency Management Department to purchase 1 or 2 units. How do we proceed? So if I could combine that with what we're talking about regarding funding, once you have the funding per Amanda's advisement, the PO is we work with a lot of cooperative contracts. If you have your own contract, we can work with that as well. And to kind of give you some timelines, depending on the number of units, we can get those to you within 30 to 60 days, depending on where you are in the United States, sometimes sooner. So we are talking about rapid deployment, specifically because of the features and benefits of the EV ARC, as you probably saw in the presentation. Hopefully that answers that for you, James. Going on to a couple of others. Let's see. These are really good questions. By the way, somebody asked, is the presentation available to review with your colleagues later? Absolutely. We're going to send out a recording once this is done, as well as the follow-up to a lot of these questions as well. We talked about the CFI. Here's one. Sorry if I missed at the beginning. What is the current KW rating per EV charging port, assuming a dual port system is set up? That's a EV ARC specific question. I'll toss it over to Mr. Ike.
Thanks, Matt, and great question there from that side of things. So just to review, so our EV ARC product is designed as a level 2 top-off charging solution there from that side of things. So if you're familiar with that EV charging terminology of level 2 charging, that's sort of the top-off charging model. There's a broad definition of what constitutes level 2 charging. From my own experience, I've seen everything from as low as 2.5 kilowatts in some cases, going up to as high as 12 kilowatts in some cases also too, and many in between there from that side of things. So that's kind of where the EV ARC falls there from that side. So the EV ARC outputs at 5.8 kilowatts at 24 amps. So our system is always outputting at that 5.8 kilowatt at 24 amp rate. That output will be shared equally amongst however many cars are plugged in and charging at the same time. So if you just have one single car plugged in, it's getting the full 5.8 kilowatt 24 amp charging rate. If you get 2 cars plugged in and charging at the same time, it's basically going to take that charging rate and split it in half. So then each charging port is going to receive about 2.9 kilowatts, almost 3 kilowatts per port there in that instance. So
awesome. Thanks, Andy. I'm going to go back to James Welch for just a moment. He followed up with, how can we proceed with getting grants to purchase them? And I'll have my answer and I'm going to send it to Amanda. But James, the beautiful part about our agreement with Amanda, the way we function with Amanda being part of our team, is that we can help you one-on-one navigate those grants to make sure that you can purchase them. So, and I'll let Amanda answer that her own way.
Yeah, it's really as simple as reaching out to your contact at Beam. You'll receive a follow-up email and you can reply to that as well. And let's set up a time. Let's set up a 20-30 minute call, learn all about what you're doing, and figure out the best way to fund it. And then we'll, it'll be the first of many conversations. We'll walk through it all with you.
Yeah, so just to kind of talk, we sort of breezed through the slide a little bit on the next step slide on that side of things. But again, you guys will be getting a copy of the presentation afterwards. But just to you guys kind of understand next steps. So we are going to be sending out an email to everybody who attended the live webinar, as well as everyone who registered and wasn't able to attend the live webinar. So you will be receiving an email from your Beam representative early next week on Monday, the 27th of October. And within that email, we're going to include a link to the webinar recording, so you can rewatch this as you need to. You can share it with any other key stakeholders that you think would value from this information. We're also going to include a copy or a link to the webinar presentation as well. So you're going to have all that great information that Amanda had in writing. And so we'll be sharing that with you all afterwards early next week. And then once we share that with you via email, you can just feel free to reply back to that email, letting your Beam representative know your upcoming availability. And then they will then confirm with Amanda on her availability, so we can get something on the calendar based on your own availability there from that side. So
that's great. Thanks, Andy. So everyone, we're only borrowing 45 minutes of your time, and thank you again for attending and being here. I just have a couple other technical questions that I will pose for everybody's benefit. And then again, we're going to answer the other questions individually to you after the webinar, as well as send out the recorded version. Okay, just so everybody's clear. So there's 2 technical questions. Andy, get on your toes again. How big is the battery? So we're talking EV ARC. How big is the battery? And I'm going to ask you another one. The other one is, how many hours of sun are needed to have enough stored energy to charge an average size EV, 70 kWh battery in the car, from 20 to 80%. And I'm combining those two because it's a bit different on the battery size. So let me hand that over to you, Andy.
Yeah, thanks, man. And great question there from that side of things. So just to answer the simple one, so we can go up to 40 kilowatt hours of onboard storage in each EV ARC system with it there from that side. So when 40 kilowatt hours of storage is filled to its capacity, that's going to translate to being able to hold about 125 miles of driving on reserve in just the batteries themselves with it there from that side of things. So, obviously that amount, that's not an amount that is going to refill a car from 20% up to 80% in most cases with it there from that side. And this is just a great opportunity to kind of talk about, how you ultimately get the most out of an off-grid solar charging system. And, the way that our customers get the most out of it is they use it as frequently as possible, with the idea being that they're following what we call the opportunistic top-off fueling model, where the idea being that, every day or whenever they have the opportunity, they are plugging their vehicles into the system, regardless of what the battery capacity on the vehicle is. So even if the battery capacity on the vehicle has 85%, our customers are still plugging it in. Here's why. First off, since the batteries on our off-grid system, they hold a finite amount of energy. When the batteries on the off-grid system get filled up, there's nowhere for that energy to go. So you want to get that energy out of the batteries on the off-grid system and into the battery on the vehicle as much as possible, where it's going to do you practical good. And then if you're always topping the vehicle off, that vehicle will rarely, if ever, need a very long charging session, which requires a lot more energy, which is probably going to be more than the amount of usable energy in 40 kilowatt hours of storage with it there from that side of things. So, so again, it's really most optimally used as sort of a daily sort of top-off charging model with it there from that front. One thing just to also kind of understand about the system is that, hey, since it's fully solar powered and it's fully off the grid, there is going to be a little bit of seasonality to the system also too. So one thing just to kind of understand about these kind of products is that, like, for example, like during the summer months, you're naturally going to deliver more miles than you would during the winter months because, hey, during the summer, you have more hours of sun. The sun is also stronger. There's several other factors that ultimately play into just how much available energy the system is going to have with it there from that side. And again, it is going to vary based on your geography and location, the time of the year and things like that with it also too there from that side of things. And ultimately, yeah, so to use it as a top-off charging solution, that's how our customers ultimately use it day to day for their needs. So.
Fantastic. Thanks, Andy. So everyone, last question, and then we're going to close out for today. We're a couple minutes over, but this is a great opportunity to segue into how we're going to help you from here and next steps. Okay. The question is, what is the price for both the EV ARC and BeamSpot? Now, because that is a client-specific question, this exemplifies how we can move forward with every single one of you. And that would be, like, as Andy already pointed out, we're going to communicate with you after this, and then we can have an individual meeting. We can Zoom, we can go over presentations, answer any questions you have. We can pull in Amanda for funding-specific questions. We're here for you. So with that, let me answer this way, as I just did, but more concisely. Let's talk about it later on an individual call, okay? I'm going to close it out. I want to thank everyone on behalf of Mr. Ike and Amanda Wood. I'm again Matt Miller. This is Beam Global. We can't thank you enough for being here. Really appreciate it. We'll be in touch.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.